Song and so appropriate, isn't it? To have autumn leaves. Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I just absolutely fantastic song. Absolutely love it. Well, this is the fourth in a series I'm doing on the subject of creating space. And it's sometimes it's a bit of a random subject. Why are we doing creating space? And it really came out of we did a whole series in the summer on harmony. And I never know where these things are going to go. But when we arrived at the end of the series on harmony, we came to the realization that the way that you create harmony in your life, in other people's lives, in the community, internationally, the way you create harmony is by giving space for those around you to come towards you, rather than forcing one's way through or whatever it is. But when you create space, then there's an opportunity for people to come. And that's really what we're doing here. We're looking at how we create the space around ourselves, with our friends, with our family, and internationally. We'll look at that in the next couple of weeks, in order for harmony to come about. And I think it's a really important subject. We've gone through various bits and bobs of it, but this week I want to talk about our capacity to create space. It's an interesting word, capacity. It comes from the Latin, which means to take hold of, or that can contain. That which can contain. That's what capacity is. And I think, really, our ability to create space, both in ourselves and for those around us, depends on the capacity that we have to contain what's going on around us. Because, if you can't contain it, you can't create the space around it. Just a little recap. In the first week, we looked at the idea that the concept of space is one that includes not only shape and volume, it includes time as well, space. When you look at distances in actual space above us, we talk about it in terms of light years. So time is included in the concept of space. But also space, I think, we saw as a generative and creative quality that goes beyond it just being a void. It actually has the idea, space, of potentiality. Space gives the idea that it can be filled. Nothing is there, but there's a possibility of something being there. And we looked at the idea of creating space being act of love. When you create space, it is an act of love. You're giving something with no expectation of return. You're not trying to control anything. You're just giving that space. And the idea is we surrender to the divine within. We surrender to that which is within us. And we act to create space with others. And love is the quality of that space. And that's the starting point that we had, because it's not controlling. We're just giving. And when we looked at the idea of using an intuitive response in doing it, the fact that when we do create space and we do connect with that divine within, then we can actually access a spirit of guidance. We're guided in some way. I don't know how. But we feel it sometimes. We think of something that we want to say and it just comes out and somehow it's right. And we all have that feeling sometimes of just knowing what to do or knowing what to say. And when we're in touch with that guidance, it does come through. So in order to create space, in a sense, we have to listen to that aspect within us. We have to draw on that inner guidance to bring out the wisdom that's needed in any situation, because it is needed wisdom to create space. If you've got someone who's in trouble, take drugs, you can't just give them more drugs. You have to have the wisdom to know how to create the space for that person to heal themselves. But first of all, when we've done all that, we have to have the capacity to create the space. We have to have the inner resources to be able to do it. And Hazrat Inayat Khan says that the secret of the whole of creation can be traced to the understanding of what is meant by capacity. Capacity is, he says, so to speak, the egg of creation. all of this manifestation which is known to us, as well as all that's unknown to us, is formed in some capacity. The sky is capacity. Capacity is that which makes a hollow, the space in which the action of the all-pervading existence may produce a substance. All the stars and planets, he says, which we've discovered, and those we've not yet discovered, what are they? They are all capacities. And what do they contain? They contain each one according to its capacity. Whatever that capacity is able to preserve within it and give birth to. That is why one planet is not like another planet, nor one star like another star. So everything has that capacity. And that which is created out of the capacity for which the creation took place. And so it's down, I think, to our capacity to contain that we're able to give space to others around us. And like with everything else up here, we know this. It's obvious. We say, I just couldn't contain the situation. We have that expression. I just couldn't contain it. I just went off on one. And that is a function of capacity. He was out of control. She can be extremely containing. You have those words within our expressions that show us this idea of capacity and the ability to contain. We have that concept that as individuals, we're required to contain what goes on in our lives. And a lot of the times, the reason we don't give space is we just can't contain it. We don't have the capacity to contain our, whoever it is, that person. We say they're high maintenance. We don't have the capacity. I can't deal with him, he's high maintenance, And we don't have the capacity to do that. And when we cannot contain what's happening, then actually it affects our mental health. It goes, containment, capacity feeds into mental health. And so I think it's quite important in that way. So our ability to create space for ourselves and for those around us depends on our capacity to contain. And we have to develop that capacity. And the reason we don't go around massively creating space in our lives for other people, a lot of the time, is because we haven't got the capacity to contain that. We just have to get on with our lives. So we have to work on our capacity to do that. And that's what Jesus meant when he said, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. And whoever has not, even what he has will be taken away from him. I always had a problem with that, Why should the people who have, particularly in Aspen, be given more? Why the people who don't have be given less? But actually, what he's talking about is the ability to have the capacity to receive. If you have the capacity to receive, more will be given to you. If you don't have the capacity, you won't even be able to deal with what you've got in your life because it'll start shrinking. So that's what that whole phrase means. We often think it's unfair that, why should that happen? We know about developing our capacity we know it about that concept when we think about exercise. I'm developing my capacity to do weights, my capacity is now to do whatever it is. And in athletics, we develop our capacity to do that. We develop our capacity for work. So we know that developing capacity enables us to move forward. And all these things, if we can develop the capacity to give people the space, more will happen around us. But in order to create space for harmony in our lives, both for ourselves and for those around us, we have to be able to contain it. And, what it takes to contain that, what it takes to give that space to others, is really what it takes to create harmony in our lives. And that includes a whole raft of spiritual muscles. The things that it takes to contain are things like not judging to start with. It's so easy to judge others, and that takes away our ability to contain them. Well, he's like this, and I'm not going to give him the time of day. We judge people like that. And when you say, I'm not going to give him the time of day, you're really saying, I'm not going to give him the space to heal. But, we just don't think that I'm going to contain that. If you look at Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements, there are aspects of giving space. Be impeccable with your word. Do not take anything personally. Do not make assumptions. Always do your best. All ways of creating space, particularly the second one. Do not take anything personally. So often we think, something is always about us. Well, I was in City Market and he just blanked me completely. Obviously, I'd done something. You don't know what's going on with the person, but we do take it personally when something happens around us. We just don't know what's going on. And, our ability to not take it personally does create space. Taking me personally often stops our ability to have capacity to create for others. Well, if she's going to be like that, then I'm not going to, all that sort of stuff. When in reality, we've got no idea what they're thinking. When I looked at it, most of the Sermon on the Mount is about creating space. If you think about it, it's all about giving people the space for harmony. Turn the other cheek. It's about creating space. Love your enemies. It's about allowing your enemies to have the space. The Lord's Prayer. It's all about creating space for the divine, asking God to come in, for receiving guidance, give us this day our daily bread, and for forgiveness, creating space for all those things. Not storing up treasures for yourself on earth, creating space for other treasures to come, not worrying. Worry takes up so much space in our heads. Not worrying. Knock and the door will open. Being willing to ask. These are all about creating space. All of it's about creating the capacity within ourselves to create space for others. And the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. That is creating the space to have things happen around you. And it's called the golden rule because it's in every single religion. It's mentioned in one form or another. These are all the attitudes we need to develop the capacity for creating space for those around us. And it's through, really, our spiritual practice. It's through meditation, through prayer, through study, that we create the space within that enables us to create the space for others. We really have to work on, dealing with our attitudes, dealing with our, unhelpful ways that we deal with other people around us. And we do that by working on our spiritual life. In Lauren Roche's Radiant Sutras, number 35 says, and this sort of gives an example of how this works. He says, shining one, breathing out, letting go, and falling into knowing all of creation as existing within space. And you are absorbed in that vibrant, empty fullness. In this moment, your body is intimate with space, engaging essence with essence, balancing in the midst of vast emptiness. Know this utter freedom. He's describing meditation, breathing out, let go, and fall into knowing all creation is existing within space. And you are absorbed in that vibrant emptiness. He's describing meditation. In this moment, in this meditation, your body is intimate with space, exchanging essence for essence, balancing in the midst of vast emptiness. No utter freedom. It's a description of the meditative process of creating space. And that was number 5. Number 36 says, space is worthy of worship and wonder. It is the field within which everything exists. Again, meditation. Rest your eyes in emptiness. Inside a room, a temple, even a little jar, any contained space. Throw the one who is seeing into the center. The one who is seeing is the self. Throw the one who is seeing into the center. Entrust your mind to the embrace of space. In a flash, all boundaries will dissolve. The idea that when you're in meditation, you become the space. And so the importance of letting go of all our preoccupations, all our attitudes, all our judgments, and just being there as a part of that infinite space of the universe by becoming space itself and not filling it with our ideas and opinions. That's what we do in our spiritual practice. We actually become space, and therefore we create the capacity to give space to others. And it's our spiritual practice in that our work is done. And listen, I've said this before, if you haven't got a spiritual practice, come and tap me on the shoulder and let's have a conversation and create one. And if you have got a spiritual practice, invest in it, deepen it, because that's where the work is done. That's where all this work is done. It's not with me jabbering on here. It's in your room, on your own, on the cushion. That's where it's done. And really, my role is just to encourage you to do that. All these sermons talks are exactly the same. They're just really saying, get on the cushion and do it, because that's what works. And that's what works in creating space. Because we've created the space for ourselves through our inner work, particularly in meditation. We're letting go of all those attitudes and opinions and placing our attention in our hearts, creating the capacity for that greater space. And as we do that for ourselves, it gives us the tools, the capacity to do the same for those around us. And you can see that this creating space, it's not something that can just happen. It has to be worked for. In international politics, things like that, they don't work for creating space. It's not what they do. If you don't do it, they attack you. Whereas creating space is a whole different agenda. There has to be a commitment, and we have to see what's stopping us from doing it in the first place. One way people prepare themselves in this sort of way is by fasting. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the non-eating type of fasting, although I don't tend to go into that hugely myself. But fasting, meditation is actually a fast from thinking. It is literally holding fast from our thoughts. That's where the word fasting comes from. It's holding fast. And the idea of holding fast, Thomas Merton says, the goal of fasting is inner unity. This means hearing, but not with the ear. Hearing, but not with the understanding. It is hearing with the spirit, with your whole being. The hearing that is only in the ears is one thing. The hearing of the understanding is another. But the hearing of the spirit is not limited to any one faculty, to the ear or to the mind. Hence, it demands the emptiness of all faculties. And when faculties are empty, then the whole being listens. There is then a direct grasp of what is right before you, that you can never be heard with the ear or understood with the mind. Fasting of the heart empties the faculties, frees you from limitations, from preoccupations. That's Thomas Merton talking about the creating, holding fast from thoughts. It's the fasting of the heart that creates the capacity to create the space for those around us to transform and to change. Because we're not getting in the way. We are hearing with the Spirit rather than with our ears or our basic understanding. And we are all a work in progress in this. All of us, we're all moving towards it. And when we find ourselves not being able to create the space for others, or they come back to us, quite often they come back to us in a way that upsets us. Well, I didn't expect you to say that, or whatever it is. then it's up to us not to just let it go, but to think, what do I need to do next to create the space? We have to continually work on ourselves in order to have that come about with those around us, rather than react to the reactions of others. We are the work that needs to be done so that the world can do its work, that we can work out what needs to be done around us. So we have to not only decide to make a difference, and we do have to decide to make a difference in our lives. You have to decide to make a difference. If you haven't made that decision, the priority is just so low, it's just not worth it. We have to decide to make a difference. We have to love to create the space, to tap into the spirit of guidance to be shown what to do. But also we have to create the capacity within ourselves to actually do what needs to be done. We have to be a strong enough container to hold the space for transformation. And that does take work. I'm going to move on to gift day now. So you'll see where I'm going with this quickly. And the idea of capacity is also relevant to the idea of gift day. As members of this community, you create the capacity for the chapel to act. It is your permission. You're turning up and participating, whether that be online or in person, that creates the space for the chapel to make its contribution. And it's specifically the money that's given that enables us to do all the things. For me to be here, for the lights to be on, for the Loneliness Project, the outreach into the community, the speakers, and for, as it says in our mission, to remind people in Aspen that there is foremost a spiritual dimension to our existence. That is what this is about, trying to shift the needle a little bit towards the essence of life. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin break in, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's what we're trying to do here. And when you make a contribution to Gift Day, you enable us to have the capacity to move that needle a little bit towards the important things of life. Now, Bruce is going to be saying a bit more about this later on, but do bear in mind that this is a space that needs to be created over and over. And what you give creates the capacity for that space to be transformative rather than just being an empty building. Because this building, it is a space that enables us to do what we do. That's why it's here. The building per se is not the reason. The reason is what we do inside it, what we create. It's the space that the building gives us that's important.